We're going to have another look at our passage, Habakkuk 3:17 and 18, but this time we're going to add a little bit of context to it. We would remember that one of the most important things to help us understand a passage and interpret a passage is to see the things that came before, to see the things that came after, to set it in its context. And so what we've done here is I've added the verse prior to verses 17 and 18, and the verse after verses 17 and 18. And I'll just read this. I haven't included the words for verses 17 and 18, but I'll include them as I read them. I heard, and my inward parts trembled. At the sound, my lips quivered. Decay enters my bones, and in my place I tremble, because I must wait patiently for the day of distress, for the people to arise who will invade us. And then we have our verses, though the fig tree should not blossom, and there be no fruit on the vines, though the yield of the olive should fail, and the fields produce no food, though the flock should be cut off from the fold, and there be no cattle in the stalls. Yet I will exult in the Lord, I will rejoice in the God of my salvation. The Lord God is my strength, and he has made my feet like hinds' feet, and makes me walk on my high places, for the choir director on my stringed instruments. Now, we might just start with that last part there, for the choir director on my stringed instruments. It seems a little bit odd in a passage of prophetic writing like the book of Habakkuk, but this is basically something that you would find in the Psalms. So what this tells us is the type of literature that this passage is it's poetry. It's something like the Psalms. It may even be a prayer. Okay? That's kind of an interesting observation, but we find that at the beginning of many of the Psalms in the book of Psalms. All right, well, let's look at verse 16 then, because 16 is going to help us out quite a bit. We're going to probably observe maybe first of all that word there, because, which is going to give us a reason, possibly explanation, possibly cause and effect. We'll go with cause and effect here. This is the effect. My inward parts trembled. My lips quivered. Decay enters my bones, and I tremble. So we've got four statements of the effects upon Habakkuk, and we probably again have that law of restatement. He says virtually the same thing four different ways, and the cause is given at the beginning. I heard something. At the sound, these things happened to him. His inward parts quivered, his inward parts trembled, his lips quivered, decay entered his bones, and he trembled because of something that he heard, because of the sound of something. And we might ask, well, what exactly is that Habakkuk has heard that has caused such a negative response to him? And then he tells us down here, I must wait quietly for the day of distress, for the people to arise who will invade us. Now, if we were taking into account the context of the whole book of Habakkuk, we would realize that he has talked about this already in chapters 1 and 2. Okay? So I've just given you the paragraph of which those two verses 17 and 18 are a part. That's part of the context. If we're really going to do justice to this passage and interpret it well, we need to expand our context to the whole book of Habakkuk. And what we've discovered is that there is a coming day of distress upon Habakkuk and the people of Judah. There is a people who is coming who is going to invade them. And so what that tells us, if we go back to our original observation sheet, these things, the fig tree not blossoming, no fruit on the vines, the yield of the olive failing, the fields producing no food, the flocks being cut off, no cattle in the stalls, those things may be very literal. Because if they're invaded by a foreign army, and we see earlier it's the army of the Chaldeans, the Babylonians, those things probably will happen. There won't be any food. There won't be any crops. There won't be any animals for them. Okay? So this gives us quite a bit of help in understanding exactly what Habakkuk is talking about. So we'll look at the verse that comes after it then. Verse 18 had said, "Yet I will exult in the Lord, I will rejoice in the God of my salvation." Something we could highlight that we didn't before is how God is referred to here. It's referred to as the Lord God. In this case, we've got God in capital letters, and we've got Lord in lowercase letters. In the previous sheet, we had the Lord in capital letters, we had God in lowercase. Whenever we see L-O-R-D in capitals, that's a translation, a way of writing the name Yahweh. In deference to the Jewish people who don't use that word, literally the Hebrew text here is Yahweh. And God, it's Elohim. And then here we have God in capitals again. That's actually Yahweh, because the word Lord is the word Lord. It's not Yahweh. So we've really got Lord Yahweh is my strength. And so he says several things about God. He says he is my strength. He has made my feet like hinds' feet. He makes me to walk on my high places. Probably then we have a question, what in the world is this talking about? What is a hind? What are hinds' feet? How do hinds' feet help me to walk on my high places? We'll leave that though, but you'd need to look that up in a concordance to see what a hind is, maybe a Bible encyclopedia or dictionary, maybe a commentary, and that will give us some help there. But he's comparing God. Again, this is poetry, so he's comparing God to some kind of an animal. And then our job is to figure out, well, how is God like this animal? What's the point of the comparison?